When the Galactic Empire first heard about humans, they didn't take them seriously. In their long history, the Empire had seen hundreds of species rise and fall. Some begged for peace. Others resisted with all their strength. None had ever truly frightened them. But there was something about Earth, something quiet and unsettling that made even the Empire's admirals uneasy. Humanity had appeared late on the galactic stage. While other species built fleets and colonies, humans had stayed close to their small blue world, speaking softly but watching everything. They never asked to join the Empire. They never sent ambassadors. They never sent soldiers. They simply listened. At first, the Empire thought this was arrogance. To ignore an empire that ruled thousands of worlds was an insult. The Emperor's Council wanted to make an example out of Earth. They believed the humans would surrender the moment Imperial warships appeared in their skies. After all, that was how it always worked. But when the first fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system, something strange happened. The human channels went silent. Their satellites turned away. Their communications cut off, not out of fear, but as if by design. The Empire hailed them again and again, but no response came. The humans neither threatened nor pleaded. They simply disappeared behind their silence. The admiral in charge grew frustrated. He ordered his ships forward, confident that Earth would be taken within hours. But the moment the fleet crossed the outer boundary of human space, their signals vanished. The Empire waited for a report. None came. A day passed. Then two, then an entire week. Every trace of the fleet was gone. No debris, no distress call, not even a final transmission. It was as if the void itself had swallowed them whole. The Emperor's Council tried to stay calm. They said it was a technical problem, maybe a navigation failure or a solar flare, yet deep down, unease began to grow. No fleet in Imperial history had ever vanished without a single trace. Still, pride would not allow the Empire to admit weakness. A second fleet was sent, this one larger and better armed. They approached cautiously, scanning every inch of space around Earth. For a moment it seemed quiet. Too quiet. Then one by one their ships stopped responding. The command vessel sent a short, broken message back to the Empire before it too went dark. The only words that came through were, "They see us." After that, silence again. The Empire's admirals stared at the empty star maps in disbelief. The humans had not fired a single known weapon, and yet two fleets, thousands of lives, hundreds of ships were gone. The Emperor demanded answers, but there were none to give. Science officers examined the data and found nothing. No energy signatures, no explosions, no signs of battle. Just a blank space where the fleets had been. That was when the fear began to grow. The Empire was not used to mystery. They understood war, invasion, and domination. But this quiet disappearance was something new. And the strangest part was that humans never spoke about it. They sent no message, issued no threats, made no demands. The galaxy waited for them to gloat or explain, but Earth remained silent, orbiting its star as if nothing had happened. In the Imperial military academies, cadets began whispering rumors. Some said the humans had discovered weapons that erased matter itself. Others believed the humans had mastered the art of folding space, trapping the fleets in invisible prisons. A few even suggested that humanity had never been what it seemed, that behind their calm exterior was something ancient and powerful, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The Emperor's advisors dismissed these stories as nonsense, but fear is contagious and even the highest ranks were not immune. The Empire prided itself on control, yet control was exactly what it had lost. In the following months, small observation drones were sent to monitor Earth. Most returned nothing useful, but one managed to capture a brief image before being lost. A single human station floating above the planet, its lights dim, its systems calm. The strange part was that it didn't look like a military base. There were no defenses, no weapons, just quiet machinery. Yet the drone's sensors detected something it couldn't explain. A faint, steady pulse of energy, rhythmic like a heartbeat, echoing across space. The scientists studied the signal for weeks, but they couldn't decode it. It wasn't a distress call or a warning. It felt intentional, as if it was saying, "We know you're watching." Back on the Empire's capital world, the High Council gathered in secret. They argued about what to do next. Some said they should open peace talks before humanity grew hostile. Others demanded another show of force. The Emperor listened in silence before giving a single command. Wait. It was the first time in centuries the Empire had chosen patience over power. Meanwhile, throughout the galaxy, the story of the vanished fleets began to spread. Merchants, smugglers, and travelers spoke of the humans as ghosts, an invisible power that didn't fight wars but made them disappear. The more the Empire tried to control the story, the faster it spread. Soon, even their allies began to question whether standing beside such a reckless ruler was wise. What frightened the Empire most wasn't the loss of ships. It was the complete lack of understanding. Every other enemy they had ever faced could be studied, predicted, defeated. But humans didn't fit any pattern. They were neither conquerors nor pacifists. They built machines that reached the stars but didn't use them for domination. They sent explorers, not invaders. And when threatened, they didn't react with rage, they simply vanished behind silence. To many in the Empire, that silence was worse than open war. In the months that followed, Imperial intelligence tried to learn more. They intercepted transmissions from human colonies, listened to their music, read their broadcasts. What they found was confusing. Humans spoke often of peace, cooperation, and hope, but their history was filled with endless wars. They had fought each other for centuries, destroyed their own cities, and nearly ended themselves more than once. And yet somehow they always survived, always rebuilt, always grew stronger. One analyst described them best in his report to the Emperor. Humans do not seek war, but they are born from it. They understand destruction too well to glorify it. The Emperor didn't like that report. He ordered it sealed. Still, whispers continued to spread. Officers began resigning from their posts near human territory. Civilians refused to trade near Earth space lanes. Even the Empire's propaganda struggled to hide the truth. Everyone, from the lowest worker to the highest noble, could feel it. Something about humanity was different. They weren't a new threat, they were a mirror, a reflection of what the Empire feared becoming. One evening, as the Emperor looked out over the shining towers of his capital, he asked his advisor a simple question. Why do they not strike us if they are so powerful? The advisor hesitated before answering. Because they don't need to, my Emperor. They have already made us afraid. That night, the Emperor didn't sleep. In every corner of the Empire, the mood had shifted. The soldiers trained harder, but their eyes betrayed uncertainty. The scientists worked endlessly to understand the disappearances, but found only silence. The admirals avoided any order involving Earth. The great Empire, once proud and fearless, had begun to tremble, and on the edge of known space, humanity remained still, silent, watchful, unprovoked. Some said they were waiting. Others said they had already decided the Empire's fate. But no one could be sure. The only thing everyone agreed on was that something was coming. Not a battle, not an invasion, something else. For the first time in generations, the Empire had discovered fear, not the kind born from explosions or bloodshed, but the kind that hides in the unknown, the fear of realizing you are not the strongest anymore, and that somewhere out there exists a species that doesn't need to fight to win. The Empire had always believed power came from domination. Humanity was about to teach them that true power came from restraint, and though the galaxy didn't know it yet, that quiet lesson, the silence of Earth, the patience of humans was only the beginning of something far greater, because the humans didn't wage wars. They ended them. The silence around Earth had become too loud for the Empire to ignore. The Emperor's patience was wearing thin and his pride was bleeding. 2 entire fleets gone, no trace left behind, no answers. It was a humiliation the Empire could not hide forever. Rumors had already spread across the stars. Whispers that the primitive species from the blue planet had somehow defeated the most advanced warships in the galaxy without firing a single shot. The Council tried to calm him. They spoke of diplomacy, of caution, of waiting until they understood more. But the Emperor had ruled for centuries through fear and control. To him, silence was not mystery, it was mockery. He couldn't accept that a small young world like Earth could challenge the might of his empire and walk away untouched. So he made the decision himself. A 3rd fleet would be sent. This one would not simply pacify Earth, it would crush it. Thousands of ships, heavy carriers, and siege destroyers gathered in orbit around the Empire's core worlds. Soldiers lined up in the halls of the command vessels, confident they were marching toward another easy victory. They joked that the humans were probably still using metal bullets and fossil fuel rockets. They didn't believe in the rumors. They couldn't. Believing meant accepting fear, and fear was not allowed in the Empire. As the fleet prepared to depart, one of the Emperor's advisors made a quiet plea. "We don't understand them," he said. "Every weapon we have failed to make them respond. Maybe they want peace, maybe silence is their warning." But the Emperor only waved his hand. "Peace is for the conquered," he said coldly, "and Earth will kneel." When the great fleet entered human space, everything seemed calm. Too calm. The system's sun burned gently in the distance, and the blue world below looked peaceful, almost fragile. The admiral of the fleet opened a broadcast toward Earth's orbit. "This is the Galactic Empire," he announced. "Surrender your planet and its colonies or face the full power of the Imperial Armada." No answer came. He repeated the message again. Then again. Still nothing. The human network stayed dark. Their defense satellites were silent. Their orbital stations looked abandoned. It didn't make sense. Any other species would have been begging for mercy by now. The admiral decided to act. He ordered a group of smaller ships forward to scan the area. They sent back only static and interference. He frowned, then gave the order that would change the galaxy forever. "Prepare to strike." The first wave of missiles was launched. Thousands of bright trails crossed the void, heading toward Earth's orbit. But before they could reach the atmosphere, every missile vanished. Not exploded, vanished. The ship's sensors showed nothing. One moment the missiles were there, the next they were gone like dust wiped from glass. The fleet paused. Confusion spread across the command decks. Then one by one the ship's systems began to flicker. Screens went dark. Engines lost power. Communications failed. Within minutes, the entire armada was floating helplessly in silence. On the main command ship, panic began to rise. The admiral shouted orders, demanding explanations, but no one could give one. It was as if something invisible had reached out and simply turned the fleet off. Then, through the static, a faint signal appeared on every channel. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't even a language. It was a heartbeat. Slow, steady, deliberate. Thump, thump, thump. And then it stopped. Moments later, all contact with the fleet was lost. The Empire's capital world received fragments of the event through scattered data bursts. The energy readings were impossible. No explosion, no impact, no known weapon signature. Just a brief pulse that stretched across space, and then nothing. A third fleet gone. The Emperor's palace fell into chaos. Some accused human technology of surpassing their own. Others claimed it was a natural phenomenon. But the truth was simpler and far more terrifying. No one knew what had happened. Humanity had erased 3 of the Empire's greatest armadas without firing a single visible shot. The Emperor locked himself away for days. Outside his chambers, the council debated endlessly. Some whispered that the humans were not attacking because they didn't need to, that they were capable of more destruction than the Empire could imagine, but chose restraint. For the first time in history, the Empire's enemies, small, broken worlds once conquered, began to hope. They watched as the untouchable power that had ruled them for ages trembled at the thought of a silent species that did not obey the rules of war. Meanwhile, on the edge of human space, observation drones continued to disappear. Every attempt to approach Earth ended the same way: silence. But one drone, positioned far enough to avoid detection, managed to capture something extraordinary. A single human ship moved slowly through space. It wasn't large, not even close to the Empire's capital ships. It looked old, almost fragile, with scars and burns along its hull. But it moved with purpose. The Empire's analysts watched closely as the ship approached the remains of the vanished fleets. What they saw next froze their blood. The human vessel extended a bright beam of light into the dark, and for a brief second, hundreds of Imperial ships flickered into existence, completely intact. They weren't destroyed. They were just stuck, suspended in space like statues. Engines cold, lights off. Trapped in a silent cage, then in the next instant, they disappeared again. The transmission cut off, and the drone systems failed. When the Emperor's scientists reviewed the footage, they couldn't explain it. The energy used was unlike anything in the Imperial records. It wasn't weaponized plasma or gravitational fields. It was something else. Some speculated that humans had found a way to manipulate time or fold matter. Others said the footage was fake, corrupted by interference. But the Emperor knew better. He saw fear in his scientists' eyes. They didn't dare speak the truth aloud. The Empire's propaganda networks tried to hide the disaster, but the truth spread faster than they could contain it. In markets, soldiers' barracks, and transport stations across the stars, one phrase began to circulate, softly at first, then louder and louder. Humans don't wage war. They end it. The Empire tried to dismiss it as nonsense, a myth made to comfort those who hated their rulers. But deep down, everyone knew the pattern. Whenever the Empire attacked, humanity answered not with violence but with disappearance. Not destruction but silence. The Emperor's pride began to crack. He ordered every scientist, every strategist, and every historian to find out what humanity had truly become. The more they learned, the more terrified they grew. Humanity's past was filled with endless wars. Civilizations on their world had risen and fallen countless times. They had fought wars that burned their skies and shattered their own continents. But somehow they had survived it all. And when they finally reached the stars, they swore never to repeat those mistakes again. Humanity had learned that war was not power. It was failure. The Emperor didn't understand that kind of thinking. To him, peace came only through fear. But the humans had gone beyond that. They didn't conquer. They didn't demand. They simply existed, and their very existence made others hesitate to fight. Soon, imperial fleets began refusing orders. Soldiers muttered about the ghosts of Earth. Captains claimed their ships malfunctioned whenever they got near human space. Entire sectors started to question their loyalty. In one distant outpost, an imperial officer looked at a faint transmission that had appeared on his screen. It was a simple image, an old Earth flag floating against the stars with a single line of text beneath it. "We don't fight for victory. We fight to stop the fight." He stared at the message for hours, unable to decide if it was a warning or a promise. The Empire's confidence, once unbreakable, began to crumble. For centuries they had believed war was the answer to everything. But now they faced an enemy that refused to play the same game, and that made them powerless. Across the galaxy, smaller civilizations began contacting the humans not as rulers or subjects, but as equals. They wanted to learn, to understand how a species could hold such strength yet choose not to use it. And though Earth never sent fleets or armies, their presence began to shape the balance of the entire galaxy. In silence, humanity had done what no other power could. They made the Empire afraid of peace. The Emperor sat alone in his grand hall, surrounded by trophies of conquest, staring into the endless darkness outside his window. For the first time, he realized that his empire's weapons meant nothing. His armies meant nothing. Because somewhere out there among the stars was a species that didn't need to destroy to win. And though he didn't want to admit it, he knew deep down what the rest of the galaxy was beginning to accept. Humans weren't warriors. They were the end of war itself. The Empire had always believed that knowledge was power. Every world they conquered, every species they ruled, had been studied and catalogued. But when it came to humanity, every answer only brought more confusion. Their silence, their history, their calmness under threat, it didn't fit anything the Empire understood. After losing 3 fleets, the Emperor ordered his intelligence division to investigate Earth quietly. No more attacks, no more fleets. He wanted to understand this strange species that could destroy without destruction, that could make entire armies vanish without violence. Small stealth probes were sent to watch from a distance. They recorded everything: light patterns, transmissions, movements, even the smallest signals coming from the human colonies. The Empire's best scientists gathered in the observation chambers to study the data. What they found left them speechless. Humans were not living in fear or chaos. They weren't even preparing for war. They were calm, peaceful. Children played in green fields. Families built cities filled with light and music. Ships left their planets not for invasion but for exploration. Even after wiping out Imperial fleets, they had not armed themselves for defense. It was as if humanity didn't see the Empire as a threat at all. To the Empire, that was terrifying. It wasn't arrogance. It was confidence. Quiet, steady, unshakable confidence. The scientists continued watching. They studied human communication networks, their histories, their education, and the more they saw, the more they realized something that shook the Empire's belief to its core. Humans were not peaceful because they didn't know war. They were peaceful because they knew it too well. The human archives were filled with endless wars, centuries of battles, revolutions, and destruction. They had fought over land, over faith, over power. They had burned their skies and poisoned their seas. But every time they came back stronger. They rebuilt their cities, buried their dead, and promised to do better. The Empire's analysts read human texts and recordings and found something remarkable. Even in their darkest wars, humans never stopped dreaming about peace. They wrote songs about it, built monuments for it. They carried guilt for every life lost. No other species in the galaxy had ever done that. The Empire began to see the truth. Humanity's silence wasn't weakness, it was mercy. But the Emperor refused to believe that. In his mind, everything had to have a weapon behind it. He ordered his spies to dig deeper. If humans had this kind of power, then there must be a weapon somewhere. A superweapon capable of making fleets vanish, of freezing ships in time. He was convinced that humanity had simply hidden their technology. So the Empire sent a small covert team to one of the human colonies, disguised as traders from a neutral world. They expected to find hidden bases or secret weapons research. What they found instead changed everything. The human colony was quiet, built on green plains beside calm oceans. There were no soldiers, no defense towers, no warships orbiting above. The Empire's spies walked freely among the people and found them. Ordinary, friendly even. They talked about science, art, and exploration. They helped strangers without suspicion, but the most unsettling part was their awareness. They knew exactly who the visitors were. One human, while showing them around, looked directly at the hidden recorder on the spy's wrist and said softly, "You don't have to be afraid. We know why you're here." The spies froze. No threats, no arrests, just that calm voice, saying it like a fact. "You've lost enough," the human added quietly. "Go home before your emperor loses everything." The spies left that day, carrying more fear than data. When they reported what had happened, the emperor dismissed it as manipulation. "They're playing a psychological game," he said, trying to make us hesitate, but his council was not convinced. One of the senior members, a battle-hardened strategist, finally spoke up during a meeting. "Maybe that's not a game, my emperor. Maybe that's who they are. Maybe humans don't fight because they don't need to prove they can." The room went silent. The emperor rose from his throne, eyes sharp and cold. "Every power needs to prove itself," he said. "If they won't speak, we'll make them speak." And with those words, he ordered something that would mark the turning point of history. A secret strike. Not a fleet this time, but a single stealth cruiser, equipped with an experimental energy weapon designed to destabilize planetary shields. Its target? A small human outpost far from Earth. The ship arrived silently, cloaked in darkness. It aimed its weapon and fired a beam toward the human settlement. The beam hit and simply vanished. No explosion. No damage. Nothing. Then the human outpost sent out a single signal, a message that reached not only the Empire's cruiser but every Imperial channel across the stars. It said, "We warned you once. Do not make us repeat our mistakes." And then the signal changed. It became a broadcast of Earth's history, real footage of humanity's past wars. The Empire watched in silence as they saw cities burned, oceans turned red, skies filled with smoke. Billions lost, planets scarred, entire nations erased. And yet at the end of it all, humans stood among the ruins. Building again, the broadcast ended with a single sentence. "We ended our own wars so no one else would have to." Across the Empire, people who saw it began questioning everything. Soldiers who had spent their lives fighting for conquest started wondering if victory was even worth it. Civilians who once cheered for imperial power now whispered about peace. The Emperor ordered the broadcast to be erased, but it was too late. The message had already reached millions. In the days that followed, reports came in from the Empire's borders. Fleets refused to move toward human space. Officers delayed orders, claiming technical issues. Even generals began avoiding meetings with the Emperor, afraid to be sent on what they now called the Silent Road. For the first time in centuries, fear wasn't aimed at the Empire, it was inside it. The Emperor could feel his grip slipping. He blamed spies, traitors, and rumors, but deep down he knew the truth. Humanity hadn't destroyed his empire's fleets to win. They had done it to stop the fighting before it began, and that idea, that kind of mercy, terrified him, because mercy was something the Empire had never understood. Meanwhile, humanity continued as if nothing had happened. Their ships still explored. Their colonies still thrived. Their silence remained the same. But to those who were watching closely, there was something deeper in that silence now. It wasn't a warning anymore. It was patience. a waiting that made the Empire's leaders restless. The Emperor held one final meeting with his generals. "They think they can scare us into peace," he said. "They think silence is strength. We will show them the true meaning of power." But even as he spoke, he noticed the faces around him. There was no fire in their eyes anymore, only fear and doubt. They had all seen what humanity could do and what they chose not to do. The meeting ended in uneasy quiet. No one dared to speak the thought that hung in the air. Maybe the Empire had already lost, not through battle, but through belief. And out there, far away on the edge of the galaxy, Earth turned slowly around its sun, calm and quiet, carrying the species that had once nearly destroyed itself, but had risen above its own nature. They didn't threaten. They didn't conquer. They just watched, and that was enough to make the most powerful empire in the galaxy tremble, because deep down, the Empire had started to understand something that no weapon could destroy. Humans didn't just end wars. They ended the need for them. The Empire's silence had become heavy. The Emperor still sat on his shining throne, but the light around him no longer felt powerful, it felt hollow. His empire stretched across thousands of worlds, yet he could feel it slipping away like sand through his fingers. Every order he gave was followed slower than before. Every command met hesitation. The fear that had once kept his people loyal was now turning against him. They weren't afraid of the Emperor anymore. They were afraid of the humans. Across the galaxy, the phrase had spread beyond control. Humans don't wage war. They end it. No one remembered where it started, but everyone whispered it. Soldiers repeated it in quiet voices when they cleaned their weapons. Traders told it in stories while crossing dark space lanes. Even the children on distant colonies whispered it before sleep. The Emperor tried to fight this fear with propaganda. He sent out messages claiming humanity had used trickery, that they were weak but clever, that their power was only illusion. But the people had seen enough to know better. The Empire's fleets had vanished. Its soldiers had returned with haunted eyes. And the humans, they didn't even celebrate their victories. They didn't need to. Then came the moment that pushed the galaxy beyond doubt. In a far sector near the border of human space, a small imperial colony was attacked, not by humans, but by pirates. The Empire's navy was too afraid to respond, so for days the pirates ruled freely, taking what they wanted and burning what they couldn't carry. The Emperor ignored their calls for help, hoping to prove that humans wouldn't intervene. But one morning the attack stopped. The colony's sensors detected movement from orbit, a single human ship. It didn't fire. It didn't even send a warning. It simply appeared, and then without a word the pirates' ships began shutting down. Their engines froze. Their weapons failed. The raiders tried to flee, but their ships wouldn't move. Within minutes they were floating helplessly in space. The human vessel then sent one short message to the colony below. "You are safe now." And then it left. When the Emperor received the report, he was furious. Not because of the pirates, but because humanity had done what he couldn't. They had protected his people better than he could protect his own empire. The message spread faster than light. Entire worlds began looking to Earth for safety. Not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as guardians. The balance of power had quietly shifted, and everyone could feel it. Inside the Emperor's palace, the air grew colder. His advisors began resigning. Generals stopped showing up for war councils. One by one, his closest allies distanced themselves. Even the loyal fleets refused to move toward human borders. Desperate to regain control, the Emperor summoned his intelligence council. He demanded answers. How do they do it? What are they using, he asked. No species can do this without weapons. The council gave him only silence. Finally, one scientist stepped forward. His voice was trembling, but his words were steady. "It's not a weapon, my Emperor. It's understanding." The Emperor frowned. "Understanding?" "Yes," the scientist said quietly. "Humans don't destroy their enemies. They make them stop wanting to fight. Somehow they know exactly where to strike. Not at ships, not at soldiers, but at fear, at pride. At the part of every being that still remembers pain. That's what they break." The Emperor's jaw tightened. "Then we will build stronger pride," he snapped. "If they use mercy as a weapon, then we will not give them the chance." He stood and raised his hand toward the star map that covered the room. "Prepare the Crimson Armada," he ordered. "We'll erase their world from existence." His generals hesitated. Every eye in the room shifted, waiting for someone else to speak first. Finally, one of them asked, "And if they stop us again?" The Emperor's voice dropped low. "Then we'll die trying." And so the Empire began its final act. For months, massive ships were gathered, the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Whole systems were stripped of resources to feed the construction. Billions of credits poured into building a single goal: total destruction. The Emperor would show the galaxy that fear still belonged to him, but humanity knew. Without spying, without fleets, they knew. Their sensors picked up the energy readings. Their scientists studied the patterns. They understood what was coming. But instead of preparing for war, they prepared for something else. Every human ship was called back. Every colony was placed under quiet protection. And then, Earth itself went dark. Its signals stopped, its transmissions ceased, its presence vanished. To outside eyes, the planet seemed abandoned. When the Crimson Armada finally arrived, the Emperor watched from his command vessel. Thousands of ships, burning bright red against the void, surrounded the silent blue world. His voice trembled with both pride and anger as he gave the order. "Fire!" The first volley of weapons struck. The planet's surface glowed under the bombardment, but then nothing. The light faded, the energy vanished, and the sensors showed nothing, no damage, no destruction. It was as if every blast had been swallowed by the air itself. The Emperor demanded another round, then another, but each time the same result. The energy disappeared. His ships began to lose power. Communications flickered, and through the static, a voice filled the air. It was calm. "Human, you were warned." Then the stars changed. All around the fleet, the stars themselves seemed to move. The Emperor's eyes widened as space twisted and folded like a living thing. One by one, his ships began to vanish, not exploding, not burning, but dissolving into the darkness. His crew screamed for help, but there was none. Soon only the Emperor's flagship remained. The voice spoke again. "You tried to bring war to a species that no longer believes in it, and now you will learn why." The Emperor shouted back, "What are you?" For a moment there was silence. Then came the answer, soft, steady, certain. "We are what war made us, and what it could not destroy." The flagship's lights flickered once more, and then everything went black. When light returned, the Emperor found himself standing in silence. The fleet was gone. His ship was drifting alone in orbit around Earth. Below him, the planet shone peacefully, untouched. He tried to hail his crew, but no one answered. Then, through the window, he saw it. Dozens of small human ships rising from the planet's surface, not in formation, not for attack, but moving calmly, like guardians taking their positions. A transmission reached his ship one last time. "You still don't understand, do you?" the voice said. "We don't fight for revenge. We fight so no one else has to live like we did." And then his ship began to move, not by his control, but guided by an invisible force. It turned away from Earth, accelerated into space, and was pushed far beyond human borders before power returned. The Emperor sat there, trembling, staring at the empty stars. His empire was gone, his fleets were gone, and humanity hadn't taken a single world they didn't conquer. They simply ended the war. The Emperor's final report, which would later be found in the ruins of his palace, contained only a single sentence: "They do not rule by fear or fire. They rule by ending the need for both." From that day on, no ship from the Empire ever entered human space again. And slowly, world by world, the galaxy began to change. Treaties replaced invasions, trade replaced conquest. And though no one ever saw another human fleet, everyone knew they were still out there, watching, waiting, ready to stop the next war before it began. The Empire had believed it could break humanity through fear. But in the end, it was humanity that broke fear itself. Because when humans fight, they don't fight to win. They fight to end it completely. After the fall of the Empire, silence ruled the galaxy. Worlds that had once shone under banners of conquest now floated quietly in the dark. Trade ships traveled again, but they moved slower, more careful, as if space itself still carried the memory of what had happened. No one dared speak of the last battle, yet everyone knew the same truth. Humanity had ended a war without firing a single real shot. Across thousands of systems, governments started rebuilding. Old enemies became uneasy allies. The galaxy had been ruled by fear for centuries, and now, for the first time, People were learning to live without it. But peace was fragile, and silence made many restless. Some believed the humans had vanished for good. Others said they had simply gone into hiding, watching from a distance. A few even thought Earth had been destroyed, replaced by some illusion that no one dared to test. But deep inside, everyone felt it. They were still out there. The story of what happened to the Emperor became legend. Some said he lost his mind, others that he vanished into the dark between galaxies. His empire had fallen apart, its pieces drifting like dust. Planet by planet, the people freed themselves. No new ruler stepped forward. The galaxy had seen enough of crowns and thrones. Still, there were those who didn't understand what kind of power humanity truly had. They wanted to know how a species so small, so scattered, could stand against the largest empire ever known. So researchers, scientists, and explorers began searching for clues, records, data fragments, anything that could explain what the humans had done. One expedition was sent to the edge of what used to be human territory. The crew was made of many races, some old rivals now working together. They found abandoned listening posts, empty satellites, and strange signals that repeated endlessly. The message was simple. Peace is not the absence of war. It's the choice not to begin it. It repeated again and again across every frequency. No encryption, no hidden code, just words. The explorers realized something. Humanity didn't hide their secrets. They shared them, but only those who could truly understand their meaning would see the power behind them. Weeks later, the same team discovered something even stranger. Floating near the ruins of an old battlefield, they found a small human probe, damaged but still active. Inside was a single recording. The voice was calm, quiet, tired, but kind. "If you're hearing this," it said, "it means we succeeded. It means someone listened. We never wanted war, but when it came, we remembered every lesson pain had ever taught us. We didn't win by destroying. We won by ending the reason to fight." The voice paused, then added softly, "Don't fear us. Learn from us." The transmission ended. When the explorers brought the recording back to their worlds, it spread faster than any fleet ever could. The galaxy listened, and slowly, things began to change. Planets once filled with armies began to build schools instead. Factories that made weapons started making machines for food, energy, and medicine. The very idea of war began to fade, not because it was forbidden, but because it had lost its meaning. Still, there were whispers. Hidden in the dark corners of space, a few leaders feared the new peace. To them, a galaxy without conflict meant a galaxy without control. They began to meet in secret, talking of rebuilding the old empire, of finding a way to rise again. They said humanity had only won because of some lost weapon, something hidden beneath Earth's surface. If they could find it, they could rule once more. So they searched. Scouts were sent into the dead zones where sensors failed and ships went missing. One by one, they disappeared. But the leaders didn't stop. They convinced themselves that humans were just waiting to be found. Months later, one of those scouts actually returned, barely alive, but alive. His ship was damaged beyond repair, his systems half melted. When he was rescued, he said only one thing before falling unconscious. "They don't guard a weapon, they are the weapon." No one could get more out of him. He never woke up again. That single sentence spread like fire. The galaxy started to remember the fear it had tried to forget. But this time it wasn't the kind of fear that led to war. It was something else. Respect. The message was clear now. Humanity's power was never in technology or armies. It was in their unity, their memory, their refusal to surrender to hate. When others saw destruction as the only answer, humans saw the cost behind it. They understood loss better than anyone, and that understanding had made them unstoppable. A new generation began studying Earth's history. Without ever meeting a human, they learned from what was left behind. Art, books, recordings, messages written in languages long forgotten. They discovered a strange truth. Humanity had always been divided, always argued, always flawed. But when the universe finally tested them, they stood together in a way no other species ever had. The old word Earth became more than a planet. It became a symbol. Schools began teaching the lessons of humanity. They weren't lessons about strength or conquest. They were lessons about survival, about compassion, about remembering what war takes away. Decades passed. The galaxy grew quieter, calmer. But on one silent night, something unexpected happened. A faint transmission appeared out of nowhere. It wasn't from any known system. No one knew who sent it or how. The signal was weak but clear. It carried only a few words. Humanity watches still. Then it was gone. Every world received it at the same time. Rich worlds, poor worlds, colonies, stations, even ships lost deep in space. For a single heartbeat, the entire galaxy paused, and then people smiled. Not out of fear, but out of comfort. It meant they weren't alone. It meant the Watchers were still there, making sure no one ever forgot what peace cost. From that day, star systems began leaving small symbols on their ships, a simple circle with a line across it like Earth's ancient flag. It was a silent way of saying, "We remember." Even the children born after the war grew up knowing what it meant. When they looked up at the stars, they didn't see enemies waiting to attack. They saw guardians somewhere out there, still watching, still ready to stop the next war before it began. And though no one had seen a human in generations, their presence was everywhere, in every act of kindness, in every treaty signed, in every ship that turned away from a fight instead of firing. In the farthest corners of the galaxy, explorers still searched for Earth. Some said it had hidden itself on purpose, cloaked behind technology beyond imagination. Others believed it had moved to another place entirely, beyond the stars where no war could ever reach. But maybe that was the lesson all along, that Earth wasn't a place anymore. It was an idea that no empire, no army, no galaxy could ever destroy. The last known record of humanity's words was found engraved on a fragment of metal drifting near the ruins of the old empire's capital world. It was simple, written in dozens of alien languages, all saying the same thing: when the stars forget peace, we will remind them, and for centuries to come, no one forgot. Whenever a planet faced struggle, someone would speak those words again. Whenever leaders argued or when war seemed close, someone would whisper, "Remember the humans." Because the truth remained, carved into the heart of every world, humans didn't vanish. They didn't die out. They simply became something larger than life, a quiet force that turned history itself into a warning and a promise. They taught the galaxy that true power isn't about destroying enemies. It's about giving others a reason not to become one. And so the legend of humanity grew, not as conquerors, not as saviors, but as the ones who ended the war and showed everyone that peace, no matter how fragile, was worth protecting. Even now, when travelers cross the edge of the old human border, they say the stars look different there, brighter, warmer, alive. Some claim they've seen shadows moving among them, ships shaped like light itself, keeping silent watch. Maybe it's just stories, or maybe humanity never left at all. Maybe they're still there, unseen, guarding the galaxy they once saved, because humans don't wage war. They end it forever. Centuries had passed since the Empire's fall. New civilizations had risen, old worlds had healed, and the stars that once burned with war now glowed with peace. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have imagined, but even after all those years, one mystery remained: humanity. Their name was still spoken in every council hall, every classroom, every home. Not as conquerors, not as destroyers, but as the reason the galaxy still stood in peace. Yet no one had seen them in generations. Some said they had moved beyond physical form. Others believed they were still out there, watching silently, waiting for the day when they would be needed again. Over time, people began to forget what they looked like. Paintings and holograms were made from ancient data, but no one was sure if they were accurate. What remained true, though, was the feeling humanity left behind, a kind of invisible warmth that filled the galaxy, a reminder that strength didn't always roar. Sometimes it simply stood quietly and refused to give in. One day, deep in a remote corner of the galaxy, a small group of explorers discovered something strange. It was a planet hidden behind a cloud of magnetic storms. No map showed its coordinates. No beacon marked its space. It was as if the world had been deliberately hidden from every sensor. When they managed to land, the air was calm. The sky was blue. The ground beneath their feet was covered in green fields, soft wind, and silence. It felt peaceful, too peaceful. There were no cities, no weapons, no machines. Only nature and the faint hum of life. As the explorers walked further, they found a structure made of stone and glass, simple, beautiful, and perfectly preserved. Inside it, there was a single table, and on it rested a metallic plate covered in old symbols. After hours of translation, they realized it was written in dozens of languages, some so ancient that even their translators struggled. The message was short. Here lies the memory of a world that chose peace over power. We did not vanish. We became the silence that keeps others from screaming. The explorers stood in silence. None of them spoke for a long time. It felt like they were standing in front of something sacred, not a grave, but a promise. When they returned to their ship, they tried to send the message to the central archives, but the signal refused to travel. Every time they tried, it disappeared into static. It was as if the planet didn't want to be found. Before they left orbit, one of them looked down at the surface again and noticed something incredible. In the light of the planet's sunset, the ocean shimmered in a way that formed shapes, patterns that looked like faces, cities and stars all at once. It was as if the planet itself was alive, breathing, remembering. Maybe it wasn't just a world. Maybe it was them, humanity, transformed into something beyond comprehension. When the explorers returned to the known systems, they spoke of what they saw. Their story spread, and once again, whispers filled the galaxy. People began to believe that humanity hadn't died or hidden. They had become part of the very fabric of the universe. Their energy, their memory, their spirit flowed through every star, every beam of light, every quiet corner of space. From then on, whenever a storm passed or a star went supernova, people would say, "That's them at keeping balance." And when peace was threatened, leaders would look to the skies and remember that quiet promise. Humans don't wage war, they end it. Years later, during a small political crisis on one of the outer worlds, that promise was tested again. Two colonies, once allies, stood on the edge of conflict. Old wounds reopened and fleets began to gather at the border. The leaders argued for days, refusing to back down. Everyone feared that history would repeat itself. Then, on the morning before the first attack was to begin, every ship in both fleets lost power. Every weapon went dark. The skies filled with strange lights, soft, white, silent lights that formed a ring above both planets. A voice came through every channel. Calm, steady, familiar. "You have forgotten what we gave you." The fleets froze. The people below looked up in awe. "We ended the last war," the voice continued, "so that you would never have to fight again. You were given peace, not as a gift but as a test. And now we ask you, what have you done with it?" No one answered. They didn't need to. Everyone knew the truth. Moments later, the lights faded and the ships regained power. But the war never began. The fleets turned around and returned home. The message had been enough. From that day, no one doubted anymore. Humanity was still here, not as rulers or soldiers, but as guardians, unseen but always near. And the galaxy changed once more. A new age began, one not of empires or armies, but of unity. The different species, once divided by borders, started to share knowledge, resources, and hope. They built great cities that floated between worlds where no one cared about origin or race. They called this era the Age of Light. Every world built a monument in memory of the humans. Not statues or temples, but gardens. Vast open places filled with plants and air where anyone could come to sit, to think, to remember. On every monument, a single phrase was engraved. They did not conquer. They reminded us who we are, and maybe that was humanity's final victory. Not the ending of a war, but the rebirth of understanding. Because the truth that echoed across time was simple. Humanity had never been special because of strength or technology. They were special because they understood pain and still chose compassion. They knew what it meant to lose everything, and that's what made them fight to protect everyone else from feeling the same. As centuries passed, stars changed, galaxies evolved, and life moved on. But every now and then someone traveling far from home would see something impossible, a shimmer in the dark, a flicker of light shaped like a human silhouette walking across the edge of a star. No one could ever record it. It always vanished before scanners could lock on, but the travelers always came back changed. They spoke softly, their eyes filled with quiet awe. They would simply say, "I saw them. They're still out there." And maybe that was enough. Maybe humanity didn't need to be found again. Maybe they became exactly what they were always meant to be, the heartbeat that kept the universe alive, the silent hand that stopped wars before they began, the gentle reminder that peace was never weakness. And whenever someone looked into the endless night of space and felt that strange sense of calm, they knew what it was. It was humanity, still watching, still waiting, still reminding every living being across the stars that war would never rule again. Because when humans fight, they don't fight for victory. They fight for an ending that becomes a new beginning for everyone else. And so, in the stillness of the cosmos, their presence remains not as ghosts, not as gods, but as guardians of the peace they created. Every sunrise, every quiet world, every child born without fear, all of it is part of their legacy. The galaxy moves on. New life begins. New stories rise. But one truth never fades: humans don't wage war. They end it forever.